Good morning and welcome to another live edition of Wealth Building Wednesday. Wealth Building Wednesday is brought to you by TRHT Selma. TRHT stands for Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation. And transformation is exactly what the two nonprofit organizations that come together to make up TRHT Selma. We are attempting to transform our community one day, one episode, one effort, one family, one person at a time. The two nonprofits that make up TRHT Selma are the Black Belt Community Foundation and the Selma Center for Nonviolence. For more information, you can log on to trhtselma.org. We're excited to bring you Wealth Building Wednesday every single Wednesday, 10 o'clock a.m. Central Standard Time. And every single Wednesday, we bring a different expert on different topics related to wealth building. And this morning is just like any other Wednesday morning where we broadcast Wealth Building Wednesday. We have an amazing expert, licensed counselor who is serving the Black Belt with Summer Lane Counseling. Her name is Edith Caver. Welcome. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We're excited to have you because we are connecting the dots for folks. Before we went live, we were talking about the importance of mental health and, the fact that some folks aren't necessarily thinking about mental health when it comes to finances, but those two things can be inextricably linked. And so wanted to just start by asking you, if you don't mind, a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dive into the questions. So who is Edith Caver? What are your hobbies? How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing good. I'm a little nervous, but that's okay. I am originally from Billingsley, and I'm back in in that area now, working with Summer Lane Counseling. Most of my sessions are virtual or telehealth, but I do go into the office in Selma at 300 Broad Street, and I will have sessions there for individuals that want to meet in person. I am recently licensed, so I'm a licensed professional counselor as of September 19th, and just very thankful to have this opportunity to be able to share like what I've learned through my process of becoming a counselor and working with clients in mental health and substance abuse, and just being able to provide some help and assistance for those that might be struggling or looking for help on their end.
Absolutely. And so I really want to thank you publicly, because I did thank you before we went live, but I want to thank you for delving into such a powerful career field. Mental health is or mental wellness, these are buzzwords that we're often hearing now, but there's still a degree of stigma connected to mental health, and folks thinking that, oh, well, something has to be wrong if you're going to see a counselor. And actually, counseling can be a preventative measure, right?
Yes.
And so I want to ask you, why do you believe that our mental health matters?
Well, mental health and physical health have a lot to do with each other, first off. A lot of individuals don't realize the impact on you physically and medically that your mental health can end up having on yourself. Um, uh, the issues with sleep, with digestion, with eating, I mean, that can lead to a ton of medical problems, immune system issues, and majority of it is linked back to stress, which can be linked back to mental health, and even other more difficult mental health issues can come from stress as well. But I mean, they're intertwined and they're linked heavily. And so being able to understand how your body works, what it's telling you, I love to call your body your alarm clock, because it's what tells you when something is good and when something's bad, when you're in pain, when you're feeling better. And so it gives you these warning signs of when your physical health is not in a good place, when your mental health is not in a good place. And between the two, it can intertwine and it can definitely affect each other.
So in your experience, how can our finances impact our mental health?
Well, like I said a moment ago, stress is a huge indicator and a huge trigger for mental health problems and physical health problems. I was looking up some information on the CDC website, and stress from finances is one of the biggest reasons for stress. Um, And if you were to see how stress impacts a person's life or, overall physically and mentally, you can break it up into three different categories of physical, behavioral, and emotional issues. And in each of those, you've got physical health problems, you have mental health problems. And the more stress that you have, the worse it becomes. And if you're not addressing financial issues and it continually causes stress daily, you'll run into issues of mental health problems such as anxiety, depression,
Mm.
um, uh, which can then lead to chronic depressive issues and chronic anxiety issues, social withdrawal. Substance use can also creep in there if you're trying to like numb yourself or forget what's taking place around you so that you don't have to address the issues of the stress when in reality, you're just temporarily relieving it, and then it becomes an even bigger problem later on when you do decide if you do to address the stressors. Um, but finances, yes, can definitely have a huge impact on mental health through the stress that it causes.
And so I really, and you just mentioned this term anxiety, right?
Mhm.
And for some of us, it may not be a common term
Right.
that or we've heard it and don't necessarily know what anxiety looks like or how it can manifest itself. And
Mhm.
so we do want to make sure that we are able to share that with folks. So now, are there? I know that there are 5 signs. We can find quick information about almost any topic, right?
Yeah.
But getting tired easily, being irritable, being
Mhm.
restless or seeming on edge, difficulty concentrating. Like anxiety looks different depending, I guess, on who it is.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm. Yeah, and
It's,
and don't forget to add a sense of worry in there. Like constant worry
okay.
daily, that is another big one,
Okay.
which also ends up affecting your ability to concentrate, your ability to make decisions, restlessness, and definitely issues with sleep. But it's very different for each person that may or may not experience it for whatever their stress or triggers might be for it.
And
So
so
yes.
when it comes to our finances, though, like anxiety, can you give us an example? I know prior to us going live, we talked about the difficulty that some people who may have a substance misuse disorder or even mm, may have been coming out of incarceration,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, one of the real statistics in our community is that rural communities often do not have um, programs to help people who are coming out of incarceration. So, how can anxiety be a part of that process? And I mean, can it make it worse? Does it cause recidivism, like the cycle of going right back to incarceration? Like, what does that look like when people are having really tough times with finances and facing situations like substance misuse or coming home from incarceration?
Oh, definitely. I've worked with several individuals that were either in county jail or local jail or the prison system
Okay.
that were coming out through the courts to try to receive treatment and therapy.
Mhm.
Where I worked, it was residential, so I primarily worked with individuals that lived where I worked anywhere from a 4 to 6 week period. Um, and one of their biggest concerns was, well, what am I going to do, when I leave here, when I leave the next level of care? And in those situations where housing was an issue, you don't have a job, we looked at continuing residential care, whether it's at the next level where they stay a little bit longer, focus on mental health and physical problems that had been neglected, or going to what they call the halfway house level of care, where they can live and work and start saving some money while they're paying a little bit towards that facility as part of their rent. Sober living environments are also a huge part of that as well. That would help with housing, structure, and finding a job. But the overall impact of that and the anxiety that comes with it was always at a high for most of the individuals I worked with, because it was the word uncertainty. Well, I just don't know what this is going to
Mhm.
look like. I don't know how this is really going to affect me. What about the different personalities? What if this job doesn't work out? like if I can't find a job, individuals that were on disability that come through, they run into the risk of, well, what if I lose my disability if I have to work? And so there were a lot of issues of anxiety in different ways and coming from different places, that really affected their treatment, that affected how they were addressing mental health. And then just the big elephant in the room was the fact that they were going through recovery and had to find different avenues of addressing the problems that were taking place. Once in the past was the use, trying to get the drug and then getting over it to get to the next, repeat. And so then it was the teaching them, well, let's try this instead. Here's a set of coping skills. Let's figure out what works best for you. What are the things you enjoy doing, and trying to get back into that, especially with, your meaningful activities, because it gives you purpose. It gives you motivation. It's a stress reliever too. A lot of people forget or don't realize the things that you enjoy doing, like your hobbies, relieve stress, relieve anxiety, and helps to give your mental health a break so that you can feel better about yourself. So there was a lot that comes with that area that affects them, anxiety wise, depression, and then also rebuilding their support system back up. Thankfully, in some of the local areas here, I know Otaga and Elmore, they've got court referral. Their court referral programs are phenomenal, with people that are constantly trying to reach out to help them. Dallas County's drug court with the local surrounding areas. And they've got a lot of great new programs that are coming up, one of which Summer Lane is getting to help with, be a part of. I know that involves a whole family unit, and just to be able to bring that family unit together, to stop the cycle of continually going back to use that would land them back in jail, that would have more charges, and the strong potential of prison time because of repeated offenders. And so there's a huge need for it. And you're right, there's not as many resources as there should be, but thankfully places are really starting to grasp like the magnitude of the issue, and bringing more help in and connecting more people in those areas to be able to help the individual struggling and then the family unit as a whole.
Absolutely. You know what? As I was listening to you talk about all of the things that are often coming at people who are really trying to transform their lives, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You mentioned living environment. And so I wanted to inquire about the impact that our living environment can have, like on our stress levels, especially even when it comes to our children and families, right? Because I know in the prior response, you were referring to people who may have a difficulty identifying a stable living environment, right? Because they may have a substance misuse disorder or are coming home from incarceration. But what about the impact that living environment can have on our children and families? When I think about finances and how often some children have to like move, right? Like if we're not paying rent on time, or if we've lost, say, like Section 8 benefits or what have you, or facing foreclosure, right? The impact that can have on our children and families. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Definitely. I don't think my mother would object to this, but my mom is one of those individuals from when she was younger. She experienced that, where they were constantly having to pick up, having to move, because rent wasn't paid, things weren't being taken care of, changing schools, changing friends, the living environment, just constantly moving and not being the same, not being stable. It genuinely affects every single person in the household. We hear the phrase, children are resilient, and that's true. But they also remember everything that's taking place. They may not understand why it's happening, but they just remember, we picked up, we moved, we had to do this again. We had to pack everything up in 3 hours or 24 hours, and we were gone to the next place, and just not really understanding why why it wasn't consistently the same, or why it wasn't stable. Or spouses, just constantly not understanding why the other significant other can't, maintain doing or paying bills in this way, or
Mhm.
saving the money to be able to pay the bills, or budgeting correctly, and then trying to scrounge or sell stuff, or find a part-time job that can just provide that little bit of income that would help finish the bills. So I mean, yes, it's not just the person struggling with the stress that comes from financial problems. It is the family as a whole, because children are oftentimes left in the dark, like, oh, don't worry, it's going to be taken care of. You don't need to know anything. This here,
Mhm.
you have everything taken care of. They just see the constant move, or the constant worry, or maybe even arguing if that were taking place. Um, and then maybe for the relationship side, the spouses or significant others, maybe the constant questioning or nagging or doubting, like, why can't we do this? Why can't we figure this out? You didn't explain this to me as being a problem when we met, or growing up,
Mhm.
or not growing up, or growing our relationship. And so, yes, the family unit as a whole is impacted in different ways, um, and can have a severe effect even later on in life.
And so I really, you've touched on quite a few things that I would love for us to
Sorry.
expound on.
Yeah.
When I think about, though, like what you were talking about with relationships, right?
Mhm.
And just a bit ago, you described a situation where conversations were not had in advance. Well, why did you could have told me that this was an issue, right? And
Right.
it doesn't have to be something that maybe as complicated as a substance misuse disorder. It
Right.
could be, I didn't know you were addicted to Amazon.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you
Right.
didn't tell me that. Like, right? So how can therapy, let me ask you this question first about therapy. How can therapy, which simply is a tool, y'all,
Mhm.
right? And I want to talk to folks seriously about this, because we've got to take this stigma that is connected to the idea of mental wellness or mental health. We got to take this stigma away, this thing like it's a bad thing to talk to somebody, right?
Right.
A lot of folks, a lot of Black folks grew up thinking like, oh, okay, well, I can just talk to my pastor, right?
Yes.
And some of us may have experienced church hurt as a result of that. You're going to talk to pastor, and then 3 weeks later, you hear some things that are relevant to your life that, oh, well, is the sermon based on me?
Yeah.
Well, sister or brother Brown, or whomever we are, right? Sister or brother Chapman, let me call my own last name, right? What if the pastor had 3 or 4 or 5, 10, 15, 20 people come to him in the last month about the
Yeah.
same issue? And how do we know that this is not a message that is being sent to heal the congregation, as opposed to stepping on toes? So when we think about therapy and the need to have a confidant, someone who we can trust with the information, right? Because all the folks that we're talking to in the street are not necessarily people that we need to trust with our
Right.
information. How can therapy help us navigate situations related to our finances? Say, even having those difficult conversations when we're in a relationship, and like you said, growing our relationship. How can therapy or having a counselor as a part of our team, if you will, how can
Yeah.
that help when it comes to finances?
Well, first off, just having a safe space is one of the most important things, to be able to confidently share, like, things that you wouldn't have thought you would needed to share, opening lines of communication with your significant other, and being able to talk about things that are difficult to manage, like shopping on Amazon, if that's the issue, and so being able to have somebody who is, non-judgmental, who is not biased to either side, that can literally just be a mediator and help them to realize, well, this is what you said in connection to this right here, and being able to help them put the pieces together that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to do, um, for whatever reason. Maybe it's barriers, or it's blocks, and wanting to hear what the other person is saying that might be beneficial to them, or having that outside perspective of somebody saying, well, it sounded like this was what was taking place, so this could potentially be the issue here. And having that person come in who is the unbiased individual, the mediator, and hearing constructive criticism from somebody who doesn't necessarily see them in their daily life can definitely help to open lines of communication that wouldn't have been opened from people that they know, that see them all the time, that wouldn't actually hear a lot of the stuff that they would share with someone in therapy, like a therapist or counselor. And so I think that's one of the main things, is just having that safe space, finding somebody who doesn't make you feel judged or badly over what's taking place, and allows you to share and open lines of communication to either receive constructive criticism or help put the pieces together for them.
And so when it comes to, let's say, like marriages and relationships with significant partners, how can, and this is not just finance based with this question, but what can we do? Like, how can counseling help us avoid toxic or detrimental situations with the people, with the significant folks in our lives, especially when it comes to money, because it's Wealth Building Wednesday, but just in general, how can counseling help us avoid the toxicity, right? How important is it for us to come into relationships as two whole people? Do we need individual counseling before we consider being a couple, right?
Right.
Like, so what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I feel a lot of times individuals don't realize the toxicity of relationships until something bad typically happens, whether it was something bad to themselves or the other person, or even when specifically finances, something was taken away from them. And being able to go in and talk with someone and like basically I love a puzzle. And so sharing and talking and providing all this information that's happened, and then with the help of the therapist, basically putting all the puzzle pieces together, allowing them to see, well, I didn't realize that could have been connected to this, or that this relationship brought this out in me, or that this relationship made me hide this part of myself, and so that is in my opinion, one of the biggest helps or assistance that therapy can do, is just being able to give you the picture you wouldn't have otherwise seen had you not been able to go in and share and put those pieces together with somebody else. That's what I hear sometimes a lot here recently is, well, I didn't think about that being connected to this issue, or saying this out loud would have made me feel a type of way, and realize, wow, that person might not be a good, individual in my life in that area. And so being able to just actually say it out loud again in a safe space, and with the help of somebody else putting those pieces together.
And so when it comes to setting up a counseling session, let's talk to folks so that we can reduce the anxiety, right, around mental health and seeking assistance from a therapist. Like, what could I expect? Like, if I want to make an appointment with Summer Lane, if I want to come see you, if I want to come see Mindy, what should I expect from a counselor?
Well, in the first session that we do, we call it our intake session. I'm going to ask a ton of questions, but that's so that I can understand, like, what's bringing you in, what's the problem, what's the issues that this problem is causing, and from there we figure out some history information, family related history, past history on yourself, education, like school wise, if you're in school or you're planning to be in school. Your job, is it going to interfere with times where we might have sessions? What should we look at doing so we don't interfere with that, so you can still have your job time and you can have some free time to figure out when I can provide therapy, or when can I engage in therapy sessions. In that session, we also will go over treatment plan. Like, what are the goals that you're wanting to work on? What is it you're wanting to achieve throughout treatment and therapy? And what are the steps to get you to that point where you're achieving your goals? And then from there, we lay out, like, how often are you wanting to meet? um, mornings, middle of the day, evenings. Um, do you want other people to be involved in treatment with you? If so, who would that be, and how do you want them to be involved? And so that's like the first session, and then from there, it's basically what helps to drive the rest of our sessions, with the treatment plan, goal, and objectives, to know what we're wanting to work on, what we'll talk about, and of course, any other stressors that come up or things that take place in between sessions, we'll go over that as well.
And so as far as how long a session may be, what's the typical length for a counseling session?
It varies. The intake sessions are normally a little bit longer than usual. We try to do it in about an hour, but sometimes it goes over, which is totally understandable. Um, and then after that, 30-minute sessions or hour sessions are the typical links that we would offer. And of course, any crisis situations, we would also look at doing, if you already had scheduled sessions, but something's come up and you really need to meet in between, we'll look
Mhm.
at trying to schedule a session as quickly as possible. But anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour.
And so clearly, we're talking about wealth building because it's Wealth Building Wednesday, and I do also
Yeah.
want to connect the dots for folks financially, right? So if I am someone who is considering going into counseling, I'm okay understanding that it'll probably be about an hour of me during my first session answering some personal questions, right?
Mhm.
And
Yes.
you getting to know me as my counselor. um what's the cost look like? And I'm not saying per hour, but can people best manage the cost? So if I have health insurance, is that something that works to pay for that, or can I pay out of pocket? Like what are my options when it comes to making sure that I am covering myself, if
Mhm.
you will, in the services?
Yes, both. We do accept a number of insurance. There's some that we don't, but in those situations, we would provide the information for private pay. Um, I believe Mindy is able to talk with most individuals and figure out income if we need to do a sliding fee scale, working with individuals, because the last thing we want is to turn somebody away just because they don't have the full amount. And so we'll work with them to find what potentially work as far as paying for sessions. So yes, insurance, private pay, and even I believe we have a sliding fee scales as well.
Okay. And I wanted to ask that because I know there may be folks who are watching who are considering, like, maybe this isn't such a bad option.
Mhm.
It's actually a great option. Is nothing wrong with having a therapist. I have a therapist. It really actually is an opportunity for you to tap into yourself in a totally different way. Like you say, consider
Yes.
some things that you may not have seen, how throughout your life some dots needed to be connected.
Yes.
um Grief, right? Selma, we've had a tremendous number of losses this year.
Mhm.
The world has experienced a tremendous number of losses as a result of COVID. So over the last few years, right?
Yeah.
And lifestyle adjustments, jobs that were just simply removed as a
Right.
result of COVID and things like that. And there's a grief period, and people, like, oh, well, we're okay. Not all the time. I'm
Right.
a living witness of what happens when you put off the opportunity to grieve, or don't take time. Let me not say put off the opportunity. When you don't take time to grieve,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so I lost a very close friend last year. It's been almost a year. December, it'll be a year, and did not grieve, right? Now I noticed, so we're talking about wealth. I noticed that my shopping habits differed. Other people noticed that my personality kind of shifted, right? Because I literally was angry
Mhm.
because I felt like she had been taken away. And so she was a former boss. So, and so we had spent years together, almost 10 years working together. And um, counseling can help you get through things like that. And so that we
Yes.
don't end up thinking that the smiles on our porch,
Mhm.
right? That can cause us to accumulate debt or spend money where it needlessly needs to be spent,
Right.
right? Um, So wanted to just kind of make sure that people are aware that, this is a worthwhile investment, right?
Mhm.
So for every $200, pair of shoes, that could cover some therapy sessions that will get you a lot further than those shoes, baby girl.
Right. Yes. Yes.
So,
And we actually, that's actually one of our, we have a group that focuses specifically on grief. We call it our Gloom to Bloom group.
oh,
We are finishing up our first rotation now, and we'll be starting a new one for the spring, and it'll be our fall and our spring groups. But I mean, it's something you've got to like hit head on, because it's not a
yep,
matter of if you'll experience it, it's just a matter of when.
yep.
And it's not necessarily with somebody that's passed away that you love dearly. It can be with the loss of a job, like you said, loss of income, loss of a home, or any of your personal belongings. There is a period of grief that comes with that. And Selma with the tornado, I mean,
Yep.
there was so much that came with that. And so that is definitely not something that you need to neglect, knowing how it will impact you in a negative way, but it can provide so much healing if you were to allow yourself to really focus on it and address it when it's taking place.
Absolutely. And as we begin to wrap up, I just want to thank you for your time this morning. This has been a truly fruitful conversation. I hope and pray that everyone who has been watching is tapping in. Okay. Check on your strong people, check on yourself,
Yeah.
right? Even if it's only
Mhm.
for one session once a year. Get a therapist, get a counselor. You can believe in God and seek therapy too. Like, it's
Yes.
okay.
It is.
So I want to again thank you so much for being a part of this conversation, for being such a willing vessel, for serving our community, for you being a part of Mindy's team. We're excited about Summer Lane Counseling and all of the great things that you all are destined to accomplish. And this will not be your last time on Wealth Building Wednesday, so we're excited to have you.
Right.
And for those of you all who have been tuning in, we thank you so, so very much for tuning in to another episode of Wealth Building Wednesday. We look forward to seeing you next Wednesday, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, for another 30 minutes of great information to help us get ourselves together, get ourselves well, right?
Yes. Yes.
Physically, mentally, and financially. And until next Wednesday, I want to just encourage each and every one of you all to stop procrastinating and let's get out here and start building our wealth. Have a great rest of your day.